Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. The board overseeing the Missouri State Employees Retirement Fund has voted to sell its stock investments in Chinese-owned companies. The one state senator on the board says the decision was politically motivated to help Missouri Treasurer Vivek Malik win next year's nomination in the 2024 primary. Rudy Keller is deputy editor with Missouri Independent. He was there for the fireworks, joins us from Jefferson City now with more about the decision. Welcome back, Rudy.
Well, good to be here.
All righty. First, take us through what set all this in motion, because this reverses a previous decision, I understand, about Chinese investments.
Yes, in November, State Treasurer Vivek Malik at the regular quarterly board meeting of the Missouri State Employees Retirement System, known as MOSERS, asked that the board direct its consultants who place the state's money to remove all our investments from China. The reasons he gave was that China's aggressive international posture is creating economic issues. There are also other economic issues in China itself, such as an overbuilt real estate sector, that make it a less than attractive investment, said the treasurer. The board decided in November that that wasn't what it wanted to do, and so that was a voice vote. In the ensuing month, there's been a lot of discussion. The governor weighed in and asked that the board have another meeting. Even Congressman Burleson from Springfield put a video out on his Facebook page urging the MOSERS board to take this action, and yesterday they did. It was on a roll call vote. They voted 9-2 to direct that these investments be sold, with a caveat that don't do it so fast we lose a bunch of money.
So that was my next question. They can't dump all these stocks all at once, which I assume the board does pay attention to what Wall Street's doing.
Right. Well, there are various ways that the state's money, $8.7 billion total in the pension fund, is invested, and it's mostly done by investment consultants. There are what are essentially mutual funds for institutional investors, and we've got shares of that. And those funds invest in a lot of things, including things in China. Then there are direct ownership of stocks and other securities that are traded on American and Chinese stock markets. And then there are finally some consultants who place our money in private funds that are very difficult to liquidate, and we were not directed to remove our investments in those.
Okay.
To sell, and would probably be a loss.
So talk more about what the treasurer's reasoning for doing this was.
Well, I don't know how much you pay attention to Chinese economic issues, but there are literally billions of housing units that are empty because they were overbuilt and financed by the Chinese government, and some of the major real estate firms have either gone into bankruptcy or are near collapse. There are other issues in the Chinese economy, deflation, slow recovery from COVID, but those weren't the only issues that the treasurer raised. He also raised the idea that he reminded us that there was a balloon from China that floated over Missouri last year that the federal government then shot down over the Atlantic. He reminded us that China has not joined the rest of the international community in condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and has actually been actively speaking to Putin and could supply military hardware for that fight. And finally, the aggressive posture towards Taiwan, and what would that do to the world economy should China attempt a takeover of Taiwan, a la the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So for all those reasons, the treasurer thought that it was time to get out of China.
So what were the objections from Senator John Rizzo, who said this is all politically motivated? And you just mentioned politics there.
Right. Well, the treasurer is not an office that gets a lot of attention. Most of the treasurer's press releases involve surplus property and how you can find money that you have lost somewhere along the way at a bank or some other place. And so, and our current state auditor was state treasurer last year, and he was the one who pushed for removing our investments from Russia. The state treasurer also did the current auditor also did some other things that got him some publicity as state treasurer. Vivek Malik faces two, perhaps more, well-funded Republican opponents in next year's primary. And so he needs to introduce himself to the public of Missouri because he's only been in office since January. Now, Senator Rizzo from Kansas City, the Democratic leader, said that this was all going to become part of a mail piece in his primary campaign. Well, there was a mass email that came out about 7 hours after the meeting from Vivek Malik's campaign telling us how wonderful it was that this action had been taken.
Interesting timing. So this kind of divestiture has happened in the past and under a different Republican treasurer.
Yeah. In
previous to Scott Fitzpatrick.
Right. In 2007, at the height of the war on terrorism, Sarah Steelman was state treasurer, and she pushed the Mosers board into removing all investments in Iran that had ties to Iran, ties to other countries that were identified by the State Department as a state sponsor of terrorism. And that passed, and that became the policy. And so if like an oil company was purchasing oil from Iran, Missouri's retirement investments would be removed from any holdings in that company.
And remind us again before you go what amounts of money we're talking about in Mosers funding, and how much do taxpayers, of course, kick into this?
Well, there are $8.7 billion in Mosers investment funds, and that's counted a number of couple of ways. The actuaries rate it as a higher amount, but it is the fund that pays for retirement for general state employees. And so the cost has escalated in recent years as the fund has not kept up with market, with its earnings in the market have not kept up with the needs of the fund. So since, just in the last couple of years, in the last 3 fiscal years, the price of this program has gone up about 37%. $753 million will be the contribution from taxpayers to this fund in the coming year, whereas in fiscal 22, it was $547 million. That's a product of increasing state salaries for state employees, plus a higher rate of contribution from the state, equaling the state payroll. When you get your paycheck, 7.5% is withheld for Social Security, and the employer pays an equal amount. The state pays 28.75%, I'm sorry, in the coming year to support the pension fund for its state employees.
All right. Rudy Keller with Missouri Independent talking about the Mosers decision on divestiture from Chinese investments. You can see his story on Facebook, on the Missouri Independent Facebook page, and online as well, and on KY3.com online as well. Rudy, always good to see you. We'll look forward to next time.
Well, anytime you all need me, we'll be here.
Okay. Rudy Keller, thank you again.